All right, so today we've got we're going to talk about a couple of things. So we're going to talk about using a command line, and when we do that, we'll talk a little bit about using VS Code as your editor, your IDE, and then we're also going to talk about using Git and GitHub. So these are kind of like basic tools that you need, more or less, no matter what you're doing. Everyone uses Git. GitHub, that there are, GitHub is probably the I'm pretty sure it has the largest market share for that particular functionality, but there are other things like GitHub to do the same thing. There's Bitbucket, there's several others. But Git is something that is more or less universal nowadays. So it's not like coding exactly, but it's part of the basic infrastructure that you need in order to work with other people. Okay, so here we are on the main curriculum page. You can see everything's there. Just so you know, all the README for the assignment, one of the assignments today refers to this, but this is just for your reference, kind of the process for how we do challenges on Git. So you don't need to read that now, but it's there for you. So I'm going to go to module 1 and week 1, and then today is day 2, it's the 4th. So we're going to be talking about VS Code, Unix commands, and Git. And there's a reference. Oftentimes there's some secondary like references for you. Today there's really not much of a README, but oftentimes there will be a README, which will have basically like tutorial kind of content. It's like, let me let these people in. Okay, so we're going to start first by talking about the command line. So here I have my terminal. Let me zoom in a little bit.
And then, also, yeah, so I did comment on this thing because
I think someone's unmuted. Okay,
no,
so all right, cool. So I have my terminal open. Yours may not look exactly like this. That's fine. If you haven't done all the terminal setup, the bash profile stuff, that's fine. I have some other stuff in my profile, so it's something that you can customize. Yours won't look exactly like mine, and that's fine. Okay, so here I am somewhere on my computer, and I can see that there's a file path. But how do I know, basically, how can I be sure where I am in my computer? Is there something some command I can enter? Is there any way for me to figure this out?
PWD.
Yeah. So
Present working directory.
Yeah, exactly. So present working directory. So PWD. There's a whole bunch of basically like utility programs built into Bash and other similar shells that give you all kinds of functionality for doing things. So PWD, you can think of this as a command or a function. So we're executing this function, and PWD will tell you exactly where you are on your computer. So starting at the root. So /users, /code platoon, so on, so on, so on. So I'm several directories in. So I know where I am right now. You might also want to know like what user you are. So how do you know what user you are currently? And by the way, I don't expect anyone to know this, but I know a few of you do.
Who am I? Who am I?
Okay. Who am I? So some of these commands are very intuitive, right? PWD isn't, but if you know what it stands for, it makes sense. Who am I? Even more so. So this is my username. So you'll see whatever your username is if you type in who am I. Okay, so I know where I am and who I am. What if I want to know what's around me? So I'm somewhere, I'm at a location, which is a folder in my system. So what's in this folder?
LS.
Yeah. So LS, think of like, I'm not sure what it stands for, list stuff.
Yeah.
Something like that. So this will print out all the folders and files that are in the directory where I am right now. So wherever I am in my computer, this will allow me to see everything. So there are, so all of these commands so far have just been single, it's a single command. You can also modify commands. So just like you can have a function and you can call the function with different parameters or flags, and you can, modify how the function works based on how it's called. You can do the same thing with these shell commands. So ls-l will change how ls works. So instead of giving you just one after another, all the contents in a row, it gives it to you in a kind of a formatted list with some more information. You don't really need to worry about all this stuff, but it's there. You may need to use that occasionally. So in addition to all of the visible files, there are also invisible files, or files that basically aren't shown by default. We've actually seen an example of one of those. Does anyone know which hidden file we've been working with quite a bit yesterday?
Bash profile.
Yeah, and you know that it's hidden file because it starts with a dot. So dot bash profile. So there are other things, and we can see them if we pass in this flag A. So there's a flag A, so ls A. So for whatever reason, A is showing hidden files. You can also combine flags, so LA, so it'll do both. It'll show hidden files and show them in this list format. So we see here that there are two, basically hidden files. Does anyone know what these are?
One takes you up to root, and the other one just takes you up to one directory.
Yeah. So two dots. So these are basically references. So two dots is a reference to the file above where you are. So I'm in command line X. So dot dot is a reference to PT Charlie. So I can actually list the contents of, where I am right now. I can also pass an additional argument, which is a file path, or file, in this case, referencing one file above me, and it will list the contents of PT Charlie. So two dots means one above, and one dot means where I am right now. So you can see that this happens with functions too, right? You have functions and you can have a default parameter. So you can have a function that takes a parameter, and you can set up the function to where if a parameter doesn't get passed, a certain value is assumed. There's a certain default value. And that's what's happening here. So you can explicitly pass a reference to where you are right now, or you cannot, and this utility will assume that you mean where I am right now. Okay. So we've done so far most of what you will ever have to do. Basically moving around. Oh, actually, we haven't moved around. So let me move up to this PT Charlie. So I'm going to do CD, which means change directories. So directories and file, or sorry, directory and folder means the same thing. Change directories, ... And this will take me to PT Charlie. And I can list the contents, and I can see that it's the same as right here. So if I want to go back into command line exercise, how do I do that? size.
Oh,
I think at this point, you should just be able to hit your up arrow a couple times and do your previous commands.
Should be able to do
CD
that.
back into command line.
Yeah,
that.
so, okay, so there's some good things here. So I can do an up arrow, and what is the up arrow? Give me.
Showing the commands that you've used previously.
Yeah, so I can actually see my command history. So here are all the commands that I've used in this session so far. So that's convenient, so you don't have to retype the same commands. There's this history, which you can see in a list form here. Also press type in clear, and that doesn't actually clear anything, but it kind of just moves everything up. All right.
you can type in a few letters of the beginning of it and then hit tab and it should finish it for you.
Yeah, so the issue is that I want to go here. So I can't use
CD
my
into it.
Yeah, so I need to CD into it. So I can't use my history because I haven't done that exact command yet. So it's going to be CD, which is the basic command, but I need to pass it a parameter. In this case, the parameter, if I wanted to go, backwards, I could do ... I can go up one level, but I want to go forwards, and I want to go into not just any directory, but this particular one. So I can pass this as an argument. So command, and as someone mentioned, you have the ability to use auto completion, so you can press tab. If you have enough letters that it disambiguates it, you can just type in tab and it will complete the rest of it. So that's handy. So CD command line, and now I'm back to where I am. And now if I wanted to go back up one directory again, so I could do CD, right? And then, I changed my mind. I actually want to go back into command line exercise. Then I can use my history and go press the up arrow, and I find that command. I can execute it again, and now I'm back where I started. Okay, so I'm gonna do ls. I'm gonna see what's going on here. So we're gonna walk through this very cheesy game, like a text-based game, and we're gonna use the command line to do it. Okay, so for that, I'm actually gonna open this in VS Code so you can kind of do both. We can use the GUI and the command line at the same time. So how do I open VS Code?
Code dot.
Yeah, so code dot. So if you just use code by itself, it'll open VS Code, which is probably, not what you want exactly. So typically, when you open VS Code, you want to be in a folder that's going to be your project. So either you've just created a folder and you're going to start a fresh project, or in this case, there's something already here and I want to start working with it. So I'm going to do code dot. And I can actually see here. So there's an integrated terminal here, which may not show up immediately. So the shortcut for this is, if you're on a Mac, is Control tilde. So that will pop the terminal up and down. Can you guys see this? Is this big enough? All right.
Mhm.
All right, so we can see here that we have this basic commands.txt, and I can take a look at this as it is right here. And so if I want to navigate, use CD, and I can optionally, so this is a standard convention you'll see in all kinds of documentation for code, use brackets for some optional thing. So CD can optionally pass it a parameter. If you don't pass it a parameter, it will take you basically to the root. So CD and then a particular folder, and then list contents, which you've seen, ls. It also will take flags and so on. And then make a directory, which we haven't seen yet, is mkdir, make a directory. Or folder, same thing. You can create a file. So this kind of breaks the convention of being user friendly. So touch is how you create a file. So we can just do that right now. So touch. So I executed a command to create this file in this directory, and I can see that it populates right here in my VS Code. So what if I want to delete this file now?
RM file.
Yeah, so RM for remove, and then the name of the file. So you have to be careful with this because it will really delete whatever you tell it to. And you can see that it's gone. I do ls, I can see that it's gone. All right. So and deleting a directory, it's the same rm command, but you have to pass it this flag, which tells it that it's a file, and then it's going to delete everything recursively. So if you have a folder and you want to delete it, it'll delete the folder and everything inside the folder and everything inside those folders and so on. I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, but you don't need to like explicitly try and memorize everything. You'll use these commands frequently, and you don't need to become a bash scripting expert. It's just a handful of commands that you'll use all the time. Okay, so here we are. So here's this game. So how do I enter this game folder?
CD game.
Yeah, so CD game, and if I want to see what's in there, do ls. Now I'll use the GUI at the same time, so I can click on here, this little caret, and I can see that I have the same contents. So there's this Unixia, letter to princess, .js, signpost.txt, all that stuff is right here as well. Okay, so in any game, probably start at the signpost. So if I want to read the contents of signpost, I can do it on the command line. There's several ways you can do it on the command line. The simplest one is probably cat. So cat will just basically like print out all the contents of the file, the console here. So again, so I didn't type out signpost.txt, I just did si and tab, and it auto-completed because there was no other file that started with si. And here's what the contents of the file says. Go to Unixia to find the princess. And if you don't believe that on the command line, you can come here in the GUI and click on this, and you can see that it says the same thing right here. All right, any questions so far?
I had one question and one kind of statement. The question is in regards to the RM command. When you use the flags RF, if you just use the R, does that do the same thing for a directory as the RF?
I don't think so. I think they're basically used in tandem because if you're just deleting a file, then there's no like possible recursion. There's just one thing. I haven't really tried using them in isolation. They're always so let me just try something. Let's see what happens. So if I want to create it, touch. And you don't even have to give it an extension. So file extensions are more of a like human convenience. So I created this file, and if I want to rm, wait, we're trying to do, yeah, so rm -r. So I guess that does work. I'm not sure that, I don't know that the flag did anything. I don't know if there's anything for it to do, but looks like you can.
And I kind of meant in regards to a directory instead of just a file.
Okay, so create another one. So I can, you can, you don't have to just go one file or folder at a time. You can, go exactly where you want. In this case, I'm going to jump 2 levels up here, // /. And now I'm here and I have my test and so on. So if I do rm -r test, yeah, it looks like that worked. I don't know if there's, a folder floating around without a reference to anything on my system now. So Yeah.
And this, thank you. The
Yeah.
statement was, Devin kind of messaged me in the chat. He's waiting for you to. hopefully
okay,
let him
thank
in.
you. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think the F is force, isn't it? Like if something needs some extra permissions or whatever, you force it to delete.
Let's see. So one way that we could look at that, so we can look at the man page or the manual. So man rm. So this will this is basically the user manual for this command. It's over here. You can see, so F, yeah. So F is attempt to remove, you're right, so it's force, yeah. You can also use the I options if you want confirmation before deleting, like, are you sure you want to delete this? Maybe more we're accustomed to, you can add an I. So there are a lot of options that change the exact way that this executes. That's good. So sometimes, you get in the habit of just doing the same thing over and over again, and it turns out that you're wrong. So that's good to know. Okay, so we have let's see, we're in game ls. So the signpost says go to Unixia to find the princess. So we're going to go. We can go here. We can also try to see what's going on with this letter to princess.js. So I'm going to try executing it. How would I execute this file?
I think you need to use Node, right? Because it's a standalone JS file.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a JavaScript file, so you can, you can assume that it's written in JavaScript. And if you want to execute JavaScript outside of the browser, you need a way to do that. And Node is basically a way. We'll talk more about Node on Thursday, but Node is basically a way to execute JavaScript not on the browser. So we'll use Node and letter to princess. And what happened here?
Got an error.
Yeah, we got an error. So what is the error?
In the wrong folder, right? Don't you got to go down a level?
Okay, so why do you think I'm in the wrong folder?
Well, I'm looking at your file structure, and there's another folder inside of Gain called Unixia, and that's where the JS file is.
Okay, so if I do ls, I have this. So this is where I am now. So I should be able to just do. So did I execute this file?
What was the command you used? If you scroll up a bit.
Yeah, so I'll go up in my command history. So node, letter to princess.
I think that's saying there's an error on line 269. It's trying to open a file that either doesn't exist or it's trying to access it in the wrong directory.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an error message. You'll, end up seeing lots of these, and that's how it is. Sometimes they're confusing to read. There's a lot of information in them. Oftentimes you only need 1 or 2 bits of information. So learning how to get something like this, which is a bunch of gibberish, and just focus on what you need to figure out what the problem is. So first question is, did this actually execute?
No.
Yes, it was just through an error.
Yeah, so it did actually execute. And what it's telling me is that something is trying to open this file. And I can see, so here is kind of internal JavaScript stuff. So I am getting a line number here in this file, but this is like built-in stuff. So it's a little confusing. So here is where this error is actually occurring. So you can read this. So what's actually happening here, and we'll look at the file in a sec, but a function basically is getting called here, which is doing something here. So on line 17, which is doing something on line 4, which is throwing this error. And what's happening is it's trying to do something with a file that doesn't exist. So let's just take a look real quick at this. So can someone just tell me, you don't need to give me nitty-gritty detail, but just at a high level, like what does this file do?
Delivers a letter.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it delivers a letter. So there's a few ways of, understanding what, this is code you've never seen before. And, looking at code you've never seen before is a common thing to do. So you want to just get a general idea first of like, what is the basic structure? What is this trying to accomplish? And then you can go into the particular details. We have 2 functions here. And just looking at the function names, unless the person is just devious and trying to trick you, the function names probably give you some kind of indication as to what they do. Sometimes it's misleading or incomplete or whatever, but so we have deliver letter and accept courtship. And what's happening on lines 17 and 18?
You're assigning deliver letter function to a variable, but you're really never ever calling it. And then 18, you're actually calling accept courtship and passing in letter. So I think from your traceback numbers, line 17 is the problem.
Okay, so yeah, so line 17 definitely is the beginning of our troubles here. Does anyone else want to tell me what's happening on line 17? So
you're creating a constant called letter. You're calling the deliver letter function, which is then using a constant sign of love that's trying to read in a file called signoflove.txt and convert it to a string. It then sets letter template, which doesn't have a set type to that line, and then adds the text from sign of love and then returns that. So const letter should be equal to the return value for letter template. Then passes the letter constant into accept courtship, which is checking for a certain piece of text. If that text is there, it's going to return get married. If not, it's going to get the men not impressed.
Yeah, so good. So that's a very detailed description. So good. So this this function actually is being called. So deliver letter is being called. And so the first thing you can do is when you look at some new bit of code is you can look at the functions and what they're called. And then you're probably going to want to look at how, the order in which things happen. So here's the basic structures you have to work with. And then here is how they're executed. And the process here is we're executing this function. And then when you look at an individual function, you're going to want to look at two things. What does it take? What does it take in? And what does it put out? So in this case, deliver letter doesn't take any parameters, but it does return something. And this is a string. This should probably be const. So it returns a string. So this is a function that doesn't take any parameters and returns a string. So here, what I'm doing on line 17 is I'm assigning the return value of this function call, which is going to be this string, to this constant right here. And then I'm calling accept courtship with that string passed in as a parameter. So accept courtship takes in a string, and what does this function return?
String to the console.
It returns nothing. It just logs it to the console.
Yeah, so it will return, technically it returns undefined. So this function doesn't have an explicit return value. And in that case, every function will return something. And if you don't, in JavaScript, if you don't tell it explicitly what to return, it will return undefined. So this function actually returns undefined. Console.log is not a return value. It's what's called a side effect. So console.log does not return anything. So this function basically executes another function. It returns undefined, which is basically nothing. Okay. So that's, that's how you can kind of, even if you don't know exactly, so I don't know exactly what this is. There's an import statement up here. I don't really know what this does. So you don't need to know every single detail. I don't know what this is. Looks kind of like a string, but there's some weird stuff in there. But you should be able to have some basic idea of what's happening, even if you don't understand the details. Okay. So we know that we're going to need a file called signoflove.txt. So let's go ahead and create that file right now.
Touch.
Yeah. So
Space. Sign of love.
So was the actual error with the JavaScript, the actual error was the absence of the text file? Because it was not a text file that was in the same directory.
Yeah, so it was trying to read this file which didn't exist. So now if we run this, we don't get the outcome we want, but there's not an error. So let's try and get, so we fixed the error now. So let's try and, follow the rules and see if we can figure out how to get this to work. So signpost, so we're gonna go to Unixia. So I'm gonna enter this folder. How do I do that?
CD.
Okay. So ls, I can see what's going on around, and then wiseoldman.txt. So I'm going to read the contents. I'll just use cat. And I'm going to press a few letters and then tab to autocomplete. And we'll see. Okay, you must send a letter to the princess called letter-to-princess.js. We kind of know about. She's very picky about the content, so you need to impress her. You'll have to defeat a dragon to find out what she likes. So we can also navigate on the GUI here. So instead of on the command line, you can do it here. So here's this folder, Unixia, and we can read this text file. So same thing. Okay, so we have to go into this dungeon. So we'll CD into the dungeon. And how do I find out what's in the dungeon here?
LS.
Okay. Okay, so what is this?
Python file.
Yeah, it's a Python file. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at it here. It's much easier to read. So what is, this is, so someone give me, you know, a high level overview of what this is for.
Well, it's a battle between you and a dragon, and the
Yeah.
dragon's gonna breathe fire from 1 to 20 times and skip every 2, and then it's gonna sleep for 0.3, and it's printing out the dragon every time,
Okay.
and then you're calling your attack function. So you're gonna try, while the condition is true, it's gonna try to breathe fire, and then it's gonna accept if it gets interrupted by I am slain or the sword. I think that's a sword down there at the bottom. Then
Yeah.
they
It's
accept
supposed
it.
to be a flower, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, okay, good. So you kind of described what each of these functions are doing. What about let's say the control flow? So what is, someone tell me about the series of events and the order that they occur in.
I think what he was just saying, it's gonna run, and that sleep is being imported, and that's to kind of time it out so it all doesn't spit to the console at one time. So I think the dragon will appear, I guess, 10 times, like half of the 20. And then once there's no more fire, it'll keyboard interrupt and then end the program and print I am slain.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. So I'm trying to get more at, so which line is going to get, let's say, which line is going to get executed first, basically. That's
Well,
kind of
you're
a
calling-
question.
You're calling the attack function,
Yeah.
Okay.
the last line, and so it'll go to the attack function, and it will do the try block, and then that will call the breathe fire function, and it will go through that loop until it hits the accept.
Yeah. So in some ways, this is backward. But what actually happens is the opposite. It's backwards of how you read it. So here's the first function, here's the second function, here's this, calling a function here. But what's actually happening is the reverse order. So this gets executed, which calls this, which calls this, which executes over and over again until it gets past here. We'll learn about try except later. You don't have to worry about that. Keyboard interrupt is just when you do Control C. And then, so control starts here, goes here, gets past here, and then ultimately gets past here. And then what does attack return?
Nothing.
Yes, exactly. So the version of nothing in Python is none. So there's a value called none, capital N, which is like undefined in JavaScript. So this function doesn't return anything. Again, it's printing stuff, it's doing stuff, but it's not returning a value, or it's returning none. Okay. So how do we execute a Python file?
Should just be Python and then name of the file.
Yeah, Python. So I get these delays when I'm sharing my screen on Zoom. So this will run. So the dragon spits fire, and we can look at the code, and this is going to keep running forever because true is always going to be true until we throw this exception. So keyword
Control
interrupt.
C.
Yeah, exactly. Control C. So once you do Control C, this loop stops, and then this raises an exception, which is caught here, which executes the rest of these lines 26 and 27. So here we're going to do is we're going to pick up this rows and we're going to paste it into the sign of love. Okay, and then we're going to go back and deliver the letter to the princess. So how do I do that on the command line?
Say that again?
So we've just defeated the dragon, but we're way down here in the dungeon, and we want to deliver this letter to princess.
CD ...
Okay, so CD ... Okay,
You need to go back one more,
One more.
okay,
and you need to run the letter to princess.
okay. How do I do that?
Node letter to princess.
No letter differences.
Okay, so again, just press tab to autocomplete. And looks like this works. So good news, she was impressed, but we have one more thing we have to do. So I'm tired of like jumping around, so I want to just do one command and go straight to the dungeon. Or actually, so we don't want to go to the dungeon, we want to destroy it, but I want to destroy it from here.
RM dungeon.
Okay, so if I do RM,
You're gonna have to do rm-rf. Because there's
Okay.
files inside of it.
And it's also inside of another directory, so you're gonna have to RM Unixia dungeon if you're in the game directory.
okay, so RM, and we'll add RF. We'll add this flag. So let's try it without the flag. So /dungeon. So we get an error. So if we're trying to execute this RM on a folder or directory, and it's telling us that we can't do that. So
-RF.
yeah, so maybe not the most helpful error message, but at least it tells you what the problem is. So -RF. And we can see that that's now gone. So LSCD, and it's gone. So that's basically it. So again, the basic commands here to move around is CD and then wherever you want to go. LS to see what's going on around you. You can make directories, to mkdir. You can create files, touch, and you can delete stuff with RM. All right, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna